Okay? And this is really significant. Keep in mind that this is an acceleration. It does not say in order to have motion, you need a force, because if the object is already moving along, it's going to continue to move along at that speed. It's going to continue to move. It's going to continue to roll. So you can have a velocity with no force, but you cannot have an acceleration with no force. Now, I can't begin to tell you how important this is because it gives us insight as to what is happening to an object that is moving. Okay? I said that in I don't remember if it was 67 or 69, that Voyager was launched. And right now, Voyager, it's a spacecraft, a space probe, and it is now the farthest thing from the sun that man has ever created. Okay? It is outside the solar system. First thing man has ever created that is now outside the solar system. Nothing is further that man created. It was launched in the 60s, and it is still traveling at approximately 40,000 miles per hour. And it's going to keep going like that forever. Unless acted upon by an unbalanced outside force. Now, I think that's a good way to remember it. And the reason is that it's important to understand that the last time Voyager's rockets were fired was decades ago. Here's what I'm saying. We know from this little formula over here, and I'll redraw it over here, that in order to have an acceleration, in order to have A, we need a force applied to a mass. And later on I'm going to change this to a force net. Okay? But right now, this is simple enough. A is equal to F over M. Okay, all symbols. Now, the last time Voyager's rockets were fired were decades ago. And when that rocket when that force pushed that rocket, I'm going to show like a little rocket ship, okay? It doesn't look like this, but this will get the point across. When that rocket fired, okay, decades ago, That was the last unbalanced force that pushed that spacecraft. It got it up to 40,000 miles per hour, we're going to say. It pushed it, and it was getting up to 40,000 miles per hour. Then the rocket shut off. And I think that was like probably 40 years ago. And it's still going at that speed. It will not slow down. Even though there is no more, the force now acting on it equals 0. So you can have a velocity with no force. Here's the velocity. But there is no longer a force applied. So that's why I think the second formula is so important. It describes the motion that we're talking about. Now, we also mentioned for every action, and since we got a rocket here, Newton's third law. He said for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So we fill up a balloon with air. The air is pushed out the back. The balloon flies forward. Now, we talked about in this class, so I'm not going to talk too much more about this right now. But those are the three laws. A body in motion wants to stay in motion. That's the first law, unless acted upon by an outside unbalanced force. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. So as the second law says, you have to have a force to have an acceleration. And the third law says that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, I'm going to finish this little tutorial by talking a little bit about unbalanced forces a little bit more. Now, I said that the Newton's second law said that, and the way I like to write it, you know, is that I like to say that acceleration requires a force, and of course that force has to be applied to some mass. Well, now I'm going to talk about net forces, because that's really the way I like to see this formula. And I told you that this is off. You'll see this often as force net in the book, and all it means is that after you subtract, let's make a tug of war over here. Okay. And let's put in that tug of war. Can't have a tug of war without some people. So let's put some people in here. We're going to do it nice, and instead of people, I'm going to use little stars, I think. And the reason I want to use little stars is because they're all symmetrical. There's a little star there. There's one there. Here's one there. Symmetrical meaning even on both sides. Here's one here. Another one. Here. And one more here. All the same. And as with any tug of war, we are trying to make sure this spot right in the center doesn't change. Okay? Let's put a spot in the center so we know that's our reference point. Right there. We don't want that spot to change. Well, in this case, I'm going to call everything moving in this direction the positive direction. That's the plus direction. And everything moving in the opposite direction, going this way, that's going to be my negative direction. Now, I'm going to add up all the forces. Okay? Let's give these names. This is F1. Well, this is F1. This is F2. Actually, what I'm going to do is keep all the names the same because all the forces I'm going to say are the same. So let's go back and just change this a bit. Okay, so this is all the same forces, so I'm simply going to give them, this is a force here, another force, and another force. The magnitude of this force is the same, although he is in the negative direction. The magnitude of this force is the same, magnitude meaning size. And the third one. Now I'm going to add up all the forces. Now, in case you haven't seen it before, this symbol is sum, means sum. The sum of all the forces is the same as me saying all the forces, force 1, and since they're even though they're all the same, I'm going to just show you that by putting that these are all the same forces, but they have different names. Bubba and Joe and Pete, all pulling in this tug of war. So I'm going to add all these up. I'm going to add up F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 and plus F5. Sum of all the forces. Now, I'm going to put some values in here. This is the plus direction, so I'm going to make this a +1, this guy a +1, and this guy a +1 because they're all the same magnitude. These are also 1, but they're going in the opposite direction. -1, -1, and -1. Now, if I add all these up, I've got to put them in just like I see them. So F1 is a 1, plus another 1, plus another 1 for 3, then plus, this one's a -1, plus another -1, and plus another -1. Now, can you see that the plus before the parentheses just means you drop the parentheses and use the sign internally? Well, I'm not going to go through a lot of algebra, but when we're all done, all these add up to 0, just like you could expect if all three of these guys, if 3 on this side, we're pulling 3 of the same on this side. So the sum of the forces is 0. This is our net force. Force net means the sum of the forces. So our force net is equal to 0. But what if we took away one of these forces? And if I'm going to take that away, it means I've got to take away this star too, because he's not there anymore. Now what's the force net? Looks like we have, okay, let's see if I can copy this whole thing and bring it down. Well, I don't even have to do that. Now what I do is I'm going to take out this guy. He's no longer there. Which means now I'm short 1 plus 1. And which way is this whole thing going to move now? Well, I think the tug of war is going to cause the rope to move in that direction. Why? Because we're missing one. Well, what's our net force now? Our new net force is adding up everything, and I've got a +2 added to a -3, which means my force net is a -1 in that direction. This direction. It's the same as if I took all these away and just had one guy pulling in this direction. Okay? Because basically, this guy, we'll say, cancels this guy cancels this guy, and it'd be the same as just one guy pulling in this direction because it's unbalanced now. And this is what a force net is. I'm going to end this by saying, one more time, that all this is significant because why? The most important part of